For many centuries, people have asked the question, how do messages get into our brains? It was commonly believed that the only messages traveling through our brains were the ones that we were aware of, but along the way, a different viewpoint challenged this notion. Subliminal messages are messages that make it to our brain without us knowing, and in this video, we will be taking a closer look at what exactly subliminal messaging is, its history, and whether or not psychological research backs it up. So what is subliminal messaging? A subliminal message is defined as any sort of sensory input, typically audio or visual, that gets sent to our brain without us recognizing it. What makes a subliminal message different from any other regular message that our brain receives is the fact that it is received below our minimum threshold. If you think about a stimulus being on an increasing scale, almost like a sensometer, there is a certain point called the minimum threshold where the intensity of an input makes it just noticeable to humans. Anything below this point is undetectable to a human, but despite this, our brains can still process it. It is processed in what is known as our unconscious mind. To understand the difference between the conscious and unconscious mind, think about your 5 senses and how you use them every day. Anything that you do that you are aware of is in your conscious mind, for example, petting a dog, watching a movie, or listening to music. In your unconscious mind, your sense receptors are still being used, like your hands for touching something, your eyes for seeing something, and your ears for hearing something. The difference is that you aren't aware of your senses being stimulated, so you do not recognize the stimulus itself. So why does this all matter? There are a lot of theories behind subliminal perception, and the main one is that it is believed that subliminal messages could influence someone into doing or thinking something without them realizing it. Many would consider this to be brainwashing, so naturally there has been a lot of controversy surrounding subliminal perception. The first time in history that we really see signs of subliminal perception is in 5th century BC with the Greeks. They were interested in a concept that they created called rhetoric. Although not specifically referred to as subliminal perception, rhetoric used the same principles, and it was based on the idea that if one were to ask a question using specific words, they could receive a specific answer back without explicitly prompting the other person to give that answer. Thus, rhetoric paved the way for the future of subliminal perception. Fast forward to the 1920s, and the modern concept of subliminal messaging was born. It started with the radio, which was thought to be the invention of the devil. Unfortunately for the BBC, a popular broadcasting company at the time, this was negatively affecting their business, so they decided to implicate subliminal perception into their radio jingles. In their jingles, they weaved in phrases that could be clearly heard if played backwards. For example, the words, "This is not a noose," "No, really, it's not," can be heard when one of their jingles is reversed. There was no scientific studies done on this case, but the radio eventually gained popularity, and the BBC still exists today, so maybe there was some truth behind their tactics.
By the 1950s, subliminal messaging was being used in movie theaters. The owners of the theaters used it as the method to try and promote the purchase of certain food and beverage products while the customers were waiting for their movie to start. When this began, people became very concerned, imagining that there might be some future world where the government uses subliminal messaging to manipulate the citizens. Overall, people were deeply concerned about the possible effects of subliminal messaging. Soon after that, they began to use subliminal messages in ads on TV as well. Because subliminal messages enter your unconscious mind, People did not even realize the messages that were in the ads they were watching on TV. With the amount of people getting upset, the popularity of subliminal messaging died down until the 1970s. The FCC received complaints about subliminal messaging in TV advertisements. They soon began to create rules and regulations when it came to advertisements. One example of a subliminal message involves the band Judas Priest. On December 23, 1985, two men attempted suicide after a night of going out and listening to music including the album Stained Class by Judas Priest. 18-year-old Raymond Belcamp died at the scene, and 20-year-old James Vance survived for another 3 years after they attempted suicide. The family filed a lawsuit against Judas Priest, claiming the subliminal messages in their songs was the cause of their behavior and actions. By the end of the trial, nobody got what they wanted. Judas Priest and CBS Records did not take legal responsibility for the deaths, and the defendants were left with the suspicion that subliminal messages were in their music.
What do you think would happen if we play this backwards?
I don't know. Let's try.
No. Okay.
Today, subliminal messaging can still be seen in the advertisement industry. You see them in car commercials, product companies, advertisement for big chain company commercials, and many more. Many people still question whether or not it effectively produces the desired outcome. As you are watching, feeling, or listening to something, there are stimuli entering your brain. The stimuli that are above your minimum threshold reach the part of your brain that makes you become completely aware, your conscious mind. Then there are stimuli that fall under your minimum threshold. These stimuli are a part of your unconscious mind, which is why you are not aware of the subliminal message occurring. There are two different views when it comes to subliminal messages. There are some people and studies that say it does work, and there are others that say it doesn't. There seems to be different results for each person every time. This would make sense because all brains are different, and people interpret things differently. It all depends on an individual's minimum threshold and their conscious and unconscious mind. In conclusion, there's no straight answer to whether if subliminal messages really work or not.